You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Welcome to another episode of the 21.5 Show, the Professional Pilots Podcast, by two professional pilots. Sitting next to me, a skilled airman and a freestyle rapper. I don't know. We were having dinner tonight at family dinner, Max, and you said you wanted to do freestyle rap on the show. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I went down to freestyle rap rabbit hole on YouTube today. So I was just saying, but no, that's not our gig.
No,
it's not our jam.
I just no,
that's just
can't do it.
A lot of talent that we do not have.
How do you do a freestyle rap rabbit hole?
Is this really what the listeners want to hear?
That's what I want to hear.
If you ever want to see something crazy, just look on YouTube on Juice WRLD.
Juice WRLD?
Yeah, and freestyle, and they'll just play like a song. He'll go for an hour straight, just off the top of his head. It's insane. So that it would just amaze me. That's all. Let's move on.
I love that we led with that. We've got COVID vaccine information. We've got 737 MAX back in the sky. The Juice WRLD. All right. So
never know what you're going to get,
I guess. So 12 months ago, if I would have told you that the news came out that the 737 MAX was finally going to return to service, you'd have thought that would have been a pretty big deal.
I tell you, what a year!
What a year! So
you would have thought everyone would be chomping at the bit for those airplanes, you know.
As your airline operates a lot of them, what are they saying is going to be?
They're going to bring them back into service. I think their plan is like April of 21, and I mean they're going to start the whole campaign, and Gary Kelly's going to ride in the back, you know, and make sure everyone feels comfortable. Let them change tickets if they aren't, and they're not going to rebrand or anything like that. So they're just going to put it back into service.
Good. Well,
as the safe airplane it is.
That's right. Good. Lots to get to today. We've got a little holiday week, so this episode's going to be a little bit shorter than normal. But listen, we're doing our best. We got to wrangle kids and everything else, and the holiday week, it's a lot. So, should we get into the donations first?
Yeah, let's do it.
What do we got here? Greg M., Remington C., and Michael B.
Never ceases to amaze us, but your generosity is very, very much appreciated. So thank you.
We have sent out little thank you gifts to all of you who've donated. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by visiting our website, 215podcast.com. Scroll down, and there's a little donate button, and you can send us a little PayPal. It can be for any amount. And if you do that, we'll shoot you something in snail mail. So, mailbag. Lots to cover here. Let's start off with on the more serious email, if you want to read this one, Max.
Sure. It's, hey, Dylan and Max. I love the podcast, and I'm currently at commercial training, and my flight instructor got me hooked. I want to reach out about the COVID-19 vaccine. I am the aviation safety field in the Air Force Reserve and was piqued by the podcast with Dr. Faulkner. Roughly 85% of our pilots in my wing fly for one airline or another, and obviously we are all worried about COVID. You mentioned that even if the COVID-19 vaccine is FDA approved, it needs to be FAA approved, or pilots could lose their medical. Armed with that information, I want to inform and pass information to our operators, guys, gals, and let them know. But before I did that, we have a phrase, trust but verify. And so I sent an email to the FAA Eastern Regional Flight Surgeon on this issue. The Eastern Regional Flight Surgeon, Dr. Harriet Lester, pasted my question along to HQ, Acting Federal Air Surgeon, and the reply came back saying that no one who receives an FDA-approved immunization against COVID is going to lose their medical unless they have a severe reaction. Hope this helps clear things up. Keep up the great work, Chris M.
So that's interesting because in that interview before with the AME, Tom Faulkner, he had mentioned that we needed to wait for an FAA approval beyond the FDA approval. Unfortunately, this email came in on Friday night, and then we're recording here on Sunday night, so we weren't able to verify with any official sources. But I think this is a really good lesson, right? When it comes to maintaining your medical, verifying information and reaching out and making phone calls is the most important thing. And I think that's what a lot of folks don't do sometimes.
Yeah, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. Two things. One of our listeners, a friend of mine, is looking into this a little bit further too, and has reached out to their regional flight surgeon who's on the other side of the country. So we'll see, and we'll share what he comes back with as well. But additionally, too, just along the line you were talking about, I was talking to a friend of mine, a guy that I've flown with in the past, and he just had a thing that popped up unexpectedly and wound him on blood thinners for 6 months. And he says, no, it's an approved one, blah, blah. That's what the doctor said. I said, it was the same advice we given. I'm like, look, he's an airline pilot. I'm like, you have all of these resources, utilize them. Take the 5 minutes to write an email or make a phone call to Harvey Watt, our wonderful sponsor, or there's other AMAS or whatever service that the airline, the union, and they provide, and double check that information. Make sure the medication you're on and whatever was done is not going to put you into a position you don't want to be in when you have to disclose that on your next medical application.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great point. So definitely want to thank Chris M. for writing in with that additional information. We are not always going to get everything 100% right. We fully admit that. And we love when we can all learn together, I think. So appreciate the information he's shared. We're going to continue to verify. It may be that we get that official information or more updated information before our next episode. And so if you follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, certainly, or Instagram, when we do get some definitive information, we will post that on those accounts and then do a follow-up once we hear back. All right, next email says, good morning, gentlemen. We are Greg and Jennifer, also known as the Airside Couple 3.3 on Instagram. We're both private pilots, single-engine land tailwheel endorsed, A&P mechanics, aviation enthusiasts, and also currently studying for our aircraft dispatch licenses. Ooh. We're very lucky to have jobs during these rough times in the industry, working at an MRO. We listen to your podcast every week on our way into work, and we have to say we listen to a lot of aviation podcasts, but yours is hands down our favorite. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and wit, and please don't ever change.
A thing, unless it's for the better.
I just thought this never changed. That's it.
Only if it's for the better.
So thanks for the shout out, Greg and Jennifer. Appreciate that. I will never change. I promise that right now, for better or worse.
You get married or...
Yeah, that's right. But I would love to hear from our listeners. Mailbag is always open. It's info@215podcast.com if you want to shoot us a message. Also get a ton of messages via LinkedIn. Now, are you getting a lot of LinkedIn messages from folks?
Yeah, actually I am.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, you can send messages to Link. Try and focus them all on Max if you can. No. Anytime you can make him more active.
Actually, the preferred communication method is a instant direct message, a DM on the Instagram.
For who?
For you.
Oh, yeah, because you don't even have our password. So, jeez. And then we requested a bunch of our listeners write us reviews, and then we said we'd send them some stuff, and they did. We got 4 reviews from folks on iTunes, so we appreciate that. We reached out to most of the folks that did that. If you wrote me a review and you haven't heard anything or gotten anything in the mail, then shoot us a message, and I'll get you your address. And
it's funny, of these reviews that people left, 2 of them said that it's like sitting in a pilot lounge, which I thought's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But really, that's...
I don't know. My experience of sitting in the pilot lounge is usually with a unnamed fractional pilot watching Fox News at a very
crew
loud,
meal.
Yeah, crew meal
with his shoes off in the recliner. Just
as you guys know, that Max and I are both based in Scottsdale, and one of the legendary FBOs here, we have like this pretty big crew lounge room. You know what I'm talking about? Uh-huh. And it's got like a weight set, like in the main. Is it a Bowflex?
Some sort of multi-purpose machine.
It's got like an unlimited soda fountain on one side, and then like a Bowflex on the other, and then the couch and the TV. So it's just like you can get a very weird mix of folks in there, because you got like somebody. It's either Fox News or the military channel. I don't know.
Or some sort of, or the History Channel on a military documentary, right?
Yeah, and then you maybe have a guy getting in some reps on the machine.
Somebody else hitting the soda fountain.
And somebody hitting the fountain. So
it's a real cornucopia of
so I guess that's a compliment to say that it's like being in the crew lounge, I guess. I don't know.
Well, that's how we started this thing. It's just you and I BSing back and forth.
Yeah.
And then we started recording it. Here we are.
And here we are. So let's talk a little bit about today and our guest and why the heck would we want to devote a bunch of time to paperwork?
Because paperwork is one of those things in aviation nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to do, but if not done properly, can get you in a lot of trouble. And while letters of authorization aren't the most glamorous thing in aviation, they are very important.
Yeah.
And they are ever changing, and it's something that we don't do with any sort of regularity. Maybe never for a lot of pilots. For 91 guys like us, I haven't applied for LOAs in years, and a lot of things have changed. So, since we're not the experts, we did bring in the expert.
Christy DeYoung got on our radar. She did a presentation for, I think it was the Northern California Business Aviation Association, and they did a really great webinar. And so we watched that presentation because that's what we would do on a Friday night.
Yeah, right.
And
exciting stuff. But I'm also a customer of hers and theirs, in which we're working through LOAs on a brand new 91 operation. And I mean, LOAs that I thought we had to have had been since decommissioned and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, we get into the weeds a little bit with Christy on LOAs, and it's not as dry as it would sound.
No, we haven't.
It's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, we learned a little bit. For any airline listeners, can you explain what an LOA is?
Oh, me?
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess,
well, are the other person
here? I don't know if that was a rhetorical question.
Well, we're in the crew lounge. I was talking to the guy on the Bowflex back there.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of an LOA and you're a professional pilot, that's because you are operating under op specs.
Yeah,
and op specs or LOAs are essentially op specs for 91 operators. Since we don't have an operations manual and operations specifications to refer to, we just get letters from the FAA, and they look exactly like an op spec, and they're even titled like B036. Same language, but it's called an LOA, and it's just you do have to go about applying them and make sure you have letters for every person who exercises operational control of the airplane, and it's a whole thing.
And the bottom line is it's paperwork that has to be approved by the FAA. So that's probably all you need to know. You know what I was thinking? I might change it just to change it up and be unique. Instead of calling it an LOA, I might call it a letter of A. I just a little, I don't know, just to mix it up, throw people off.
I'll tell you what, in this interview, you guys will hear it. Christy threw out a word that I've been using since we talked to her, just to ruffle people's feathers a little bit. Kerfuffle. Do you remember her saying that? It's turned into a real kerfuffle.
Yeah. I have some other words.
That's a good one to just drop, because people, what's a kerfuffle? That's what I did. I Googled it after.
Kerfuffle sounds like something that happens with like chickens. I just imagine like feathers everywhere and like.
Don't worry. They're just kerfuffling.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, we're going to chat with Christy. She does a good job of breaking it down. We kind of go at a higher level, and then we'll have a link in the show notes to their actual presentation of the webinar. It's recorded. It's on their website. It's easy to use, and you can kind of navigate around and get some information on some of the different LOAs. And then, they also jump into another topic we should probably tease right now that goes along with this. As far as the operational control stuff.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. So
it's called the illegal flight department is what, if you Google that you'll come up with a bunch of articles about it, but it's essentially having an entity that owns an airplane and does nothing else.
Yeah.
And operating and funding that with capital contribution is illegal. And could get the owner or the operator fined as well as certificate action for the pilot. So we're going to really dive deep into that one. And
our listeners are so excited.
There's a lot of people that are out there operating exactly this way and have been doing it for years. And the problem now is that the FAA is really cracking down on it. And so.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that riveting part 2. That will be
on the edge of your seat.
Important stuff, though. So definitely wanted to cover it. So let's go ahead and jump into that conversation with Christy. But first, we need to mention our friends over at Harvey Watt. We talked about protecting your medical max. That is the most important thing for a professional pilot to do. And one of the best ways you can protect your medical is to have not only the loss of medical insurance that they offer, but also the resources that they provide to just be able to call them up and have a question. Like you mentioned, those resources oftentimes go unused by professional pilots. You could have a union resource, AMAS, Harvey Watt. Those are the types of things that mean a lot to us. We like to promote to the professional pilot group. So check out harveywatt.com for more information about all the coverages they provide to professional pilots. Protect that certificate. All right, coming up is our interview with Christy.
All right, Dylan, we have a very special guest today. My friend Christy DeYoung. She works at JetRVSM, and we're going to be talking about the exciting, wonderful world of FAA letters of authorization.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Funny because I was thinking about what I was going to title this show, and I actually came up with The Wonderful World of LOAs with Christy DeYoung.
That's a really good title.
Either that or what you just said, that Dylan and I both find ourselves in LOA hell right now.
Yeah,
and it's a letters of authorization. For those of you that don't know, is essentially op specs or the FAA authorizing you to do a certain operation when you're under Part 91, right?
Right. Yeah. Letter of authorization. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Christy works and she's helping me through the LOA process, maybe soon to help Dylan. But Christy, why don't you just kind of start off, give us a little bit of your background and JetRVSMs and how you got to being the LOA queen.
Sure. So, it's every girl's dream to be the queen of RVSM, I guess. I started at Cessna back in 2004, 2005, just before RVSM was implemented, and worked in their RVSM department, and then founded JetRVSM in 2006 with John Clark. And we basically just saw that there was a need outside of Cessna for assistance with submitting RVSM and other LOA applications. Cessna is really the only manufacturer that had an in-house department specifically devoted to helping operators with LOAs. So we saw a need for helping, other aircraft manufacturers, and since then we've partnered with a lot of new aircraft manufacturers like Eclipse and Honda and Embraer when they first came out with the Phenom, and kind of helped out their flight departments to get ready for RVSM, and also to give their customers information, because a lot of these operators and pilots are coming out of smaller piston airplanes not capable of flying in high levels, and so they needed a kind of a gentle ease into the world of flying jets and the new world of FAA regulatory compliance that's going to be imposed on them. So yeah, that's basically how we started.
That was crazy back when RVSM first came out. Do you remember those validation flights that you would have to do sometimes, and you'd have to fly at low altitude? I don't know, it was like 50 feet or something, and you had that trailing cone behind you.
Oh, the trailing cone. Yeah, for the certification.
I did one of those on a beach jet, and
oh, cool.
And you did it at all different speeds, like all the way to above 250. And we had waivers to do it below Class B airspace and to be below 10 and to do all of this stuff that's normally illegal. And I remember we're at Deer Valley Airport ripping along, and you'd have to, and the thing was the tolerance was really tight. It was like plus or minus 5 or 10 feet or something when you're passing over the runway when they're doing the check. Mm-hmm. And so you'd have to get stabilized way out there on speed and on altitude. So that way, when you crossed the runway, you were right on the money. And at Deer Valley, I remember we were flying over this subdivision, and it's early in the morning, super low, ripping at 280 knots. And there's these two hills off the end of the runway there. And so we're going right between it. I remember when we started, the difference between when we started and finished, all the people from the subdivision climbed the hill. So they were at eye level with us as we'd rip through these two hills.
How cool.
It was, yeah, that was crazy. So anyway, sorry, that just reminded me of that story.
You had a lot more fun experience. Right. Yeah, I was going to say, that's way more fun than sitting behind a desk and writing manuals.
Yeah. Well, why don't you just kind of start off at the overhead view of who needs LOAs?
Well, so depending on where you fly, that will determine what type of authorizations you need. So if you're flying a jet that's flying above 29,000 feet, and this is where the regulations come into play. So the FAA has determined that you don't have to have a letter of authorization to fly in RVSM airspace in the United States. So if you've got an airplane that's RVSM capable, your crew's trained, your equipment's all functioning properly, you got ADS-B out, you can fly in RVSM airspace in the United States. Once you cross the border, there's different LOAs that you need depending on where you fly. So if you're just going to Canada, South America, Central America, you need an RVSM authorization letter to fly in their RVSM airspace. There's also various other LOAs. I don't know if you want to kind of give an overview of all the different types of LOAs that are available to operators, but depending on where you fly, there's different requirements.
So essentially, if you're flying a jet under Part 91 purely in the domestic United States, you really don't need any LOAs?
Well, the only LOA you need is actually the MMEL authorization. So that would allow you to defer maintenance on any component that becomes inoperative. So if you have, some autopilot or something that's listed on the MMEL that breaks basically, and you want to continue being able to fly the airplane because it's not a safety of flight issue. So you can defer maintenance on that item and still continue to fly the airplane. If you don't have an authorization and you're flying a jet or turbine powered airplane, you can't defer that maintenance in accordance with the MMEL. You're basically grounded until you get that fixed.
Right. So RVSM and MMEL are probably the two base level most common LOAs to get, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And then, beyond that, we have why don't you explain what RMP, the difference between RMP 10 and then there's an RMP like 10, 4, and 2.
Right. Yeah. So those are different tolerances depending on the accuracy of the flight management system. So if you have RNP 10 means that you're flying within, I think it's 10 nautical miles left or right 95% of the time. There's some tolerance that's associated with that. And then RNP4 is a tighter tolerance. RNP2 is an even tighter tolerance. So it's basically the error within the flight management system. And when the aircraft manufacturer certifies their airplane, they have to go through a bunch of testing with the avionics manufacturer to certify the airplane. So you might have an airplane that's only RNP 10 capable, or you have an airplane that can go all the way down to RNP 2, depending on the accuracy of the system.
If we were to look at somebody that's acquiring an airplane, maybe, and that's got to be a daunting task to look at this aircraft that you're maybe getting, maybe you're buying like a Citation or something like that. And then you think, what LOAs am I going to need? What equipment do I have?
That's like the last thing that people think about when they're looking to buy an airplane, and then they get kind of the bomb dropped on them because the
bomb dropped, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like,
so
remember this airplane that we told you was so much fun to fly? Well, you got to go through all this regulatory stuff first. Sorry.
And the good news is it moves really quickly through the bureaucracy.
Easy,
so I think you can get
super
those done
easy, very straightforward, easy instructions to follow. Yeah.
So when you have a client that comes to you that says, hey, we're buying this airplane, it's in pre-buy, blah, 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 we want to get these LOAs started, how the pilot's role in figuring out what LOAs do I need, and how do you work with the crews to kind of figure out what the scope of these projects are?
Well, first off, so depending on the airplane that they fly, I kind of have an idea of what authorizations they can apply for. And then you kind of narrow it down to, okay, where do you plan on flying this airplane? Or are you planning on flying it outside the United States within the first year of owning it? Because you may not want to go through this really onerous FAA application process in your brand new airplane right away. You might want to fly it a little bit, and then maybe you feel more confident. You want to fly the airplane outside the U.S. and then deal with those authorizations at a later date. So the basic LOAs, like you said, the RVSM and MMEL are easier to get than some of the other international authorizations. So if somebody is not based outside the U.S. with an unregistered airplane and is just flying in the United States and maybe is kind of toying with the idea of flying outside the U.S., then we'll see how serious they are and what authorizations they need depending on which countries they're going into.
Yeah, I mean, before when I ran the Gulfstream department, I mean, we had to have a whole bunch of these for the North Atlantic tracks and for all the long range stuff. And then now on an XLS, that's what I basically call Christy. I'm like, what do I need now? And we just want to go to like the Caribbean and Mexico and Canada. That's it.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of narrow it down from there.
Well, and that helps. So by telling me, okay, these are kind of the regions that we plan on flying in, then there's just a few LOAs that you would need to get or LOAs that are recommended.
And just to kind of give the bird's eye view too, there's the LOA to operate over the North Atlantic track. There's RNAV 1, RMP1, which is for arrivals and departures in other countries that require that. LNAV, VNAV, and LPV, again, another one that's not really required in the U.S., right? But then in other countries, and then CPDLC, which of course, do you need that for domestic CPDLC? Do you need an LOA?
No, for like departure clearance, CPDLC in the United States, you don't need it. En route, you don't need it. You only need an authorization if you're flying over the ocean and you want to communicate via data link. Okay. So FANS 1A plus is the LOA.
And we won't get into real depth on this. You guys JetRVSM did a webinar that Dylan and I both watched and have the slides for, and it was really informative. So if you really want to get in the weeds of the stuff, you can find it on the webinar on JetRVSM's website.
Yep.
So there's ADS-B out and BRNAV, PRNAV that have been decommissioned. Why would the FAA decommission an LOA?
Well, they've decided that the LOA is redundant. So ADS-B out, they got rid of. I don't think any other countries were really even requiring, except for China for a while, was requiring an authorization. This kind of, as things go by, it's just an equipment requirement, basically, not an operational authorization that you need. So you can show that you've got the equipment installed. There's really no pilot training or operations procedures that you have to go through, to show the FAA that you can use that equipment like you would FANS or flying HLA. You have to show them that you're trained properly on the equipment, what the regulations are, that sort of thing. But with ADS-B, like I said, just an equipment authorization. BRNAV, PRNAV, there's RNP5 and RNAV5. Those are kind of obsolete. So RNAV1 and RNP1 is really the LOA that replaced that authorization.
Got it.
So let's drill down a little bit on the RVSM LOA and ADS-B. And, you mentioned that for domestic flights, that LOA is not required anymore. Can you just kind of give us an update about height requirements and how all of this new playing field works?
Yeah, sure. So there's still a requirement to complete a height monitoring flight, but it's a lot easier to comply with than it used to be. So it used to be you have to go to either fly over an Agni station or you had to hire a technician like me to come up and, turn on a GPS equipment and fly around in circles for 30 minutes. But now all the monitoring is done via ADS-B data, and the Agni stations are slowly being decommissioned. So if you're flying in the United States, you're going to get monitored via ADS-B out, whether you have an LOA or not. The only difference, there's an FAA website that we can provide a link to your listeners too, but it's the NARMO website, so NAARMO, North American Regional Monitoring Agency. They have a spreadsheet. Well, they have two spreadsheets for aircraft that have been monitored via ADS-B out data. So one is for Section 3, which means that you have an RVSM LOA. So if you've got an authorization, your airplane's going to show up on that spreadsheet. If you don't have a letter of authorization, you're flying in the United States under the ADS-B out Section 9 exemption to RVSM, then your airplane will show up under that spreadsheet. So that's really the only difference.
So beyond height monitoring, though, there's other requirements if you're operating in RVSM airspace without an LOA. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't have to have training and what else? Right.
Yeah. So you do have to have training. I don't know if an inspector may or may not ask for it. If you ever get ramp checked, they may ask to make sure that you've gotten an RVSM training certificate. It's a pretty easy thing to produce, and there's not a recurrent requirement. So it's pretty easy requirement to meet. So the pilots need to be trained, and good idea to have a training certificate available in case an inspector ever asks you for it. The ADS-B out, of course, has to be functioning, which it's going to be functioning now anyway, because ADS-B out exists as a requirement now. and all the aircraft. So the aircraft also has to be current on RVSM inspections, the 24-month, which are, maintenance manual inspections or ICA inspections if you have an STC installed on your plane. So those are things that could come up during a ramp check. I don't know that I haven't heard of anybody ever been asked for this yet, but the FAA certainly could say, hey, you're flying in RVSM airspace, even though you don't have an LOA, show me that you're trained, show me that your equipment's capable, and show me that the maintenance has been completed within the prior 24 months. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, going along with that training, I've run into this a few times when I may be bringing a contract pilot in or something like that. Mm-hmm. Some RVS manuals dictate like specific training vendors I've seen. And so, they may say, oh, I'll send you my certificate from flight safety 10 years ago, but that may not actually qualify. Is that correct? Or does the FAA really just say, as long as it's from an approved training center? Or what do you think about that?
That depends on if you have an LOA and you have an operations manual. So there is definitely a section in the manual that refers to pilot training. And when the FAA is reviewing the application, they'll want to make sure that the pilots received the appropriate training. And so we'll identify what facility the pilot completed training through for the initial application. And then once the LOAs are issued, after that, the LOA responsible person just has to make sure that their training meets the requirements of AC 91 85B, the RVSM AC. If you don't have a letter of authorization, then, it's up to you.
Okay. That makes sense. That removes a little bit of the burden, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the other one, so the most popular one, I guess you could say, or most common, MMEL. There's two of them, right? Two different LOAs and one's going away. Yeah. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this too. What's the story there?
So are we. So yeah, there's been a bit of a kerfuffle with EASA. So EASA has said that they don't recognize the FAA's D095 MMEL LOA as a valid MEL. What they want to see is a custom MEL that's specific to your serial number airplane. So, meaning you've gone through the MEL, you've entered all the items of equipment that are applicable to your airplane. So, right. So the MMEL is just for any model of that airplane that you have. There's certain equipment that's variable depending on what you chose during manufacture, what post-production modifications have been made, and this and that. So they are looking for a custom serial number specific MEL that's been approved by the FAA, reviewed and approved by the FAA, and they've issued a D195 MEL authorization versus the D095 MMEL LOA, which is just the model specific MMEL that you download from the FAA website, insert a couple policy letters that are current. That's a requirement to use the DO95. So that's the difference. And yes, the DO95 I've heard it will be eventually phased out in the next year or two. They're going to give operators that have a current DO95 MMEL LOA a certain grace period to submit a request for a new LOA, but that hasn't gone into effect yet.
Oh, we don't just get a free 195 for our trouble?
No.
That's not,
unfortunately.
So for guys like me that are now applying for this, am I applying for D095 or 195?
Correct. Yeah, D095.
Okay,
yeah.
And then we'll just worry about it when.
Yeah, we'll worry about it later because the FAA has taken months and months and months and months to review these, and it's just not worth submitting it at this point.
Got it. Okay.
That switch over to D195 might be what gets you a yacht or something, maybe. We'll see. Be very busy, right?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, no, JetRVSM has not gotten into MELs too deeply, so we specialize in the RVSM and that HLA and that stuff, and the MELs are a whole different animal, whole different world.
Man. So I'll give you a chance to get on your soapbox for a second. Let's talk to all of the folks that are in the middle of buying an aircraft or thinking about buying an aircraft. When is the correct time to start working on these LOAs? Is it right in pre-buy? Do you have to wait till you close? What's the best way to do it?
I would definitely start working on it in pre-buy because there's a lot of things that come up during the LOA application process that maybe you didn't quite consider, such as naming the operator. So if you do need to submit an LOA, you have to identify who the Part 91 operator is. And a lot of times that's difficult. If you're a contract pilot and you got hired into a flight department, there may be lawyers involved that you're unaware of, dry leases in place that you're unaware of. A lot of times the principals don't tell you how they're actually operating the airplane. So you have to ask some questions, because really it's your pilot certificate that's on the line these days if you don't identify the correct operator. And the FAA is really cracking down on Part 91. What do they call it? They have these Part 91 base inspections that they're doing to make sure that you're not a 134.5 operator unintentionally. You could be an unintentional Part 134.5 operator.
Yeah. What she's alluding to. So a lot of people scratch their heads and say, well, how hard can it be to identify the operator? It's just, the entity that owns the airplane or something like that.
Or the pilot. Sometimes they think the pilot in command.
Yeah, or the pilot is the operator, right? Or the So anyway, we're gonna dive deep into this too with Christy's counterpart, John Clark at JetRVSM, who's an attorney by trade and he knows as much as there is to know about this subject. So identifying the operator in your flight department, not as easy as it would seem. I'll just say that.
And jumping along with that too, Christy, maybe this would be a good time to talk about, there's complexities with, as you mentioned, the LOA and the operator. If there is possibly more than one operator on the aircraft, does that mean there's multiple LOAs? Can you get the same LOA with different operators on it?
Excellent question. Yes, you can. So, well, to clarify, you get separate LOAs for each operator, and the same airplane can be listed on multiple operator LOAs. So say you've got an airplane and you've got 3 or 4 people that are sharing the airplane and they're dry leasing it to each other, using it for their own individual business or private use, however they're using it, then each one of those 4 individuals or businesses would have to have LOAs in their name. So you can have unlimited letters of authorization for the same airplane. Now, if you've got 10 or 11 or 12 or 50, LOAs, that's going to start raising some flags with the FAA. They're going to say, wait a minute, are you sure you're operating Part 91? You're not a charter company.
Is there any synergies or anything if you've already got the LOA and then you're adding a dry lease or a different operator or something like that? Can you kind of copy and paste a lot of the stuff, or is it still the same process to get a new one?
Well, for us, so we charge, and in terms of like pricing, we charge full price for the first operator and then half for each additional, because from our end, we're just submitting, the same paperwork, the operator name has changed. So we're providing a new you do have to submit separate applications to the FAA, depending on the FSDO. Most FSDOs require you to submit separate packages for each operator, because like I said, you're going to get separate LOAs for each operator that's in operational control. So yeah, from our end, we do discount the price, but from the FAA's perspective, it's the same amount of review goes into each operator application.
All right. And Christy, I have another question. So what about the differences between who you submit your applications for LOAs for? So like we said, RVSM, MMEL, the most common ones, where do those go to versus RMP or NATHLA or one of those other ones?
So the RVSM and MMEL LOAs or application package those are reviewed by the FSDO. So whatever FSDO services the operator's primary base of operation. So for like you guys, you're in Scottsdale, so that would be the Phoenix FSDO would review your application. If you're requesting any of the international, so NATHLA, RNP10, the Data Link LOA, AO56, those all initially get submitted to the FSDO, and then the FSDO uploads the application to a regional navigation specialist, and then the navigation specialist has to review those requests more in depth, and then it's kind of a pain, because the next gen office talks to the FSDO, and then the FSDO has to communicate what the next gen comments were to the operator, and if there's any questions or changes that need to be made or clarification or this and that, sometimes there's some back and forth, then that has to go through the FSDO, so you kind of have a little bit of a middleman situation going on.
Another story of the FAA making regulatory compliance super easy for everybody.
Yes, and they continue to do so. So they just released this OAP system. It's OAPS. And it's a great idea, but not such a great implementation. The idea was that if you needed to submit one of these applications, so NAT, HLA, RNP, whatever, you could upload the documents yourself to the FAA, and then whatever inspector was responsible for reviewing the application would be able to pull the documents from that. It's like a document upload portal kind of a thing.
Right.
And the idea was to avoid having to have the FSDO inspector manage this process, which good idea, have the operator submit the application. That's fine. But it's such a horrible system. It's been really a nightmare to work with. And the FAA has these great compliance guides that they have you fill out. So if you're requesting RNP-10, there's a BO36 compliance guide. It's got all the documents that the FAA inspectors want during their review, sample flight plan, AFM, pilot training, all this stuff is right in there. You submit it. Previously, you would just send this to the FSDO, and then the FSDO would upload it. And now through OAPS, they don't even ask for the compliance guide. It's strange. It's very odd. So it's like, why have this compliance guide if you're not going to ask for it? Anyway, so I'm not a fan of, as you can tell, of the OAPS system. It needs some refining for sure.
Well, so is the intent that any operator could just submit for LOAs on their own? Was that the intent of it?
Well, the intent is kind of, yeah. So the intent is to avoid having the FSDO inspector manage the process and give a little bit more transparency to the operator, to the manual contractor, whoever's submitting the application, to see where is it in the review process? Is somebody even looking at it? Because sometimes you submit applications to FSDOs, you don't hear from them for weeks, and nobody's been reviewing it. It's sitting on somebody's desk or in somebody's inbox. So the idea was that if you uploaded this application, you would be able to select from a drop-down list. This is the FSDO office that we're working with, and then the whatever the regional specialist would be automatically assigned to review that application. So it was supposed to be a little bit more streamlined, and maybe it'll get there, but it does need some work.
Yeah.
But as a pilot, you could contact the FSDO and say, hey, I want access to OAPS, and start uploading documents and submit an application. You still need a manual. You still need to submit all the supporting documents and fill out some FAA paperwork. So it's not like, it's super easy.
That sounds like giving a baby a loaded handgun.
Right. Yeah. That. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Here, knock yourself out.
Right. Yeah, that's fun.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you about the future initiative stuff. I've always heard the common complaint, they build every airplane the same. Why do we have to go through this compliance for different airplanes and submitting all this paperwork? Can't the OEMs handle this? And can you talk a little bit about maybe future dreams of how that might work?
Well, there is a streamlining LOAs working group that has been around for the last few years. And they have been working on I can't remember the name of it, but it's geared towards new aircraft. It'll only be applicable to new aircraft in the beginning. So there's three components to this. There's an aircraft statement of compliance. So the manufacturer would provide operators with a statement of compliance saying, hey, my G650 here, it's got all this capability. So you can apply for any of these LOAs that you want. Here's the statement of compliance showing that the airplane's capable. So that's the first step. Second step is training. So the pilots still have to, of course, go through training. The training facilities would provide a training statement of compliance, a TSOC. And so like Flight Safety, Scott International, these vendors, any vendor that goes through the FAA review process, they can get a statement of compliance. So if you as a pilot, you can go to these vendors and say, hey, I'm submitting these LOAs. What training do I need? And give me the statement of compliance so I can show it to my FSDO during review. And then the third component is the procedures manual. So the procedures statement of compliance, the PSOC, which is me. I'm a PSOC. So that's what we handle. So the procedures portion. Now, as a pilot or as a manager or, aircraft management company or whatever, you can certainly create your own procedures manual. There's a lot of lovely FAA advisory circulars and NatOps bulletins and all sorts of things that you can sift through to create your own procedures document. Or you can contact a vendor like JetRVSM and have us do it. And then the idea would be we would get a procedures statement of compliance from the FAA saying, this procedures manual has been reviewed. We don't need to review it again. If you submit this statement of compliance, we don't have to go through the whole review process of, going line by line through your manual. So the idea is to make it a little bit easier for brand new airplanes. And this working group has been working on this for 2 years now. I've been listening to the last few. Yeah, I mean, you'd think it would be pretty straightforward, right? You got a G650, you got a crew that's gone through flight safety or whatever, and you're using a manual vendor that's written thousands of manuals. You would think this would be a very straightforward process. But no, 2 years into it. And I was just on one of the conference calls the other day, and there is definitely progress being made. And now the next step is for the FAA to create kind of their own internal working group to basically,
that sounds like that's where the hang-up's going to the real hang-up's going to be.
Right. Yeah. So first you have to identify the working group, who's going to be involved in the working group, which FSDOs are going to be involved, and then you have to start testing it. So they're doing like dry runs with a few Part 91 management companies, and just to see where the flaws in the system are. So that working group, they said it's going to happen sometime the first quarter of next year, and then of course you got a few months of testing. So it doesn't sound like this is going to be something that's going to be available until probably middle of next year, being optimistic. But they're trying.
Hey,
they're
progress.
Working towards it.
That's progress. Yeah. You got to give it to them a little bit. At least they did make RVSM not required anymore, and there's been effort there, so we can't just rag on the feds the whole time. But speaking of the feds, so what do you see or hear from clients or past clients about FAA enforcement of LOAs or people, of responsible parties that are listed on the LOA for not making sure people are getting training, or what do you hear as far as that's concerned?
It's so hit or miss. It just depends on your FSDO and how involved they are, how informed they are, what personally they want to see. So a couple of FSDOs within the last year went around and contacted every operator that had an LOA that sounded like it could be a flight department company. So if you've got a Part 91 LOA in the name of Happy Cloud Flying Company or, Sky King LLC.
What about the quintessential November 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yes. LLC.
Echo Juliet LLC. That's
one of those.
That's
like an N number
giveaway.
LLC. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the FAA at those FSDOs, they went through all those. They called operators in, made them sit through a 2-hour meeting, and said, hey, you're operating illegally. If you don't change this, we're going to violate you. Blah blah blah. And other FSDOs don't bat an eye if you submit an LOA request in a flight department company name. So it just completely depends on the FSDO. Now, it's your responsibility as the operator, of course, to make sure you're submitting something that's compliant. And any FAA inspector, if they're going to do a Part 91 base inspection or even a ramp check, they could start asking you, hey, how are you operating this airplane? They'll take the pilots, take the passengers, separate them, ask them the same questions. And if the answers aren't the same, then they're going to start digging deeper into it.
Yeah, and those are essentially operational control. So who says when this airplane flies, essentially, right, is what they're going to ask.
Yeah, who's paying the pilots? Who's paying for the fuel? What's the purpose of the trip?
Okay.
So if someone hears this, Christy, and wants to come to Jesus and get their LOA correct, let's say they did have it under November 1, 2, 3 Echo Mike, but it's really a Acme widget company that's operating the airplane. Can they just change the name really easily to Acme Widget Company, or do they have to go through the whole new LOA process? Is there an easy solution?
They do have to go through the LOA application process, and we recommend that they update their manuals and submit a new application and just keep those LOAs valid or active until the new LOAs are issued. So because a lot of people that have been flying around under that LOA with the LLC has probably been doing it for 5 or 6 years. And so you don't want to all of a sudden tell the FAA, hey, just kidding. I wasn't really operating under this LOA. So I would say, however you're going to fix it. So dry lease the airplane to the correct entity, or in some cases, there is a dry lease in place and nobody told the pilots. when we were going through this application process. That happens quite often. So they say, oh, there's a dry lease. So now we submit a new application to the FAA for a new set of LOAs. And then you can cancel the old N number, whatever, Sky God LLC letter of authorization. Just cancel those.
Is that a real one that somebody's submitted under?
That's my favorite example of a name. Yes.
I knew it.
All right. Well, Christy, we will get you out of here on this one. Since you are the RVSM queen, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing about the current state of LOAs, what would it be?
I just wish there was consistency amongst FSDOs. If there could be one thing I could change, it would be, but maybe that would put me out of a job. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But it would be nice to call one FSDO inspector and get an answer on something and have the next FSDO that you call give you the same or somewhat similar answer. But, that's a pretty big wish.
Yeah, right. And I mean that's just that's not only an LOA thing. I mean that's for
it's an FAA wide thing. Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a working group formed on that sometime soon. And be resolved.
Oh, definitely.
Yes. So hopefully you can be on the board of that one too.
Yeah, it'll be great. Sounds like
all
a party.
right. Well, Christy, we appreciate your time. And if people want to get a hold of you and utilize the services at JetRVSM, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
You can call our 877 number. So it's just 877 JetRVSM. It's 877-538-7876. Or my email address is Christy, CHRISTY @JetRVSM.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the time. We certainly appreciate you coming on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Us on the wide world of LOAs. Thanks, Christy.
Hope it was useful. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And there you have it from the LOA queen, as we've coined her.
That's right.
Christy DeYoung.
That's the wonderful world of LOA. Letters of A. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so we didn't get a good LOA story out of Christy. So we're going to have to come up with something on our own.
What's a good one we were just talking about the other day?
I could tell part 2 of that Caribbean fiasco with the bug bomb if you want me to do that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's just wrap that one up.
Okay, so... All right. So if you missed that story, it was a couple episodes ago, and I talked about flying into Trinidad, and I knew we had to do the insecticide, but I didn't have any because you got to get it from Australia, blah, blah, blah. You can go listen to that story if you didn't hear it. And I ended up buying a can of Raid and spraying it, and then it got in trouble with the locals and got yelled at for an hour. And the owner of the airplane thought it was hilarious and took pictures and videos of me. And then at the end of the day, the guy gave me the can of spray and off we went. So we went to Trinidad for a couple days, which is an interesting place. I mean, you can see Venezuela from there. So it's it's as far south as you can get in the Caribbean island chain. So next day we're getting ready to head back. And for whatever reason, we were having a really hard time with the handler setting up the fuel. So, we're trying to get the contract fuel. They can't get it approved, and we're just not getting anywhere. And then on top of that, when I was trying to get this fuel set up, I said, I want to confirm that you guys have PRIST. And Max, can you tell people that don't know what PRIST is?
So some airplanes that don't have a sufficient fuel heating system have to have a fuel additive called PRIST. And PRIST is an anti-icing additive. Its primary use in the airplane is anti-icing, but it also has a biological inhibitor for this type of algae that grows in jet fuel. But the Beach Jet is one of those airplanes that requires PRIST. There's a lot of light jets and turboprops and stuff.
But before, as an airline guy, I had never heard of PRIST before. Yeah. So you may not have heard of PRIST, but anyways, it's this additive you put into it. A lot of times it's on the fuel truck, and then sometimes you also have these little spray cans that you have to attach to the fuel nozzle, and you kind of
because you can't just dump in the appropriate amount and then fuel the airplane. It has to be added injected as the fuel is being added, right? Whether that's at the truck or in the fuel filler, right?
So, anyways, we're trying to get all this fuel figured out, and then I'm also trying to figure out this PRIST thing, and then they come back and tell me that there's no PRIST on the fuel truck, and so I'm going to have my own cans. So I'm trying to locate PRIST on this island, and we ended up getting in touch with another pilot that was based on the island. And I said, "Hey, can I get PRIST somewhere? Do you know?" And he goes, "There's none on the island, man. Sorry." Hey, he goes, I'm not aware of any cans of Prist. So I'm like, oh man. So we're sitting there. We're like, well, we can't buy fuel right now because we can't get this contract fuel thing figured out. And we have no Prist. I'm like, what are we going to do here? So we end up like having to, the owner has to go like get cash out of a bank to like just like hand these guys cash, which we'll have a little lessons learned at the end of this story that can hopefully educate the next generation. But so we finally, okay, we got the cash, but we can't get Prist. So if I was to fly directly from Trinidad back to Turks and Caicos, it's like a solid like hour over water flight, at least a straight line. So I'm sitting there, I'm just like, I don't really know. That doesn't sound like a good idea. So I'm thinking, I'm like, what should I do if I can't get Prist? So here's the decision I made, and our listeners can write in and tell me what they thought about it. But so we can get enough gas. I located Prist up at the infamous St. Martin with the the beach right there on the runway.
Sunset Beach Bar.
Yeah, I called them and I said, "Do you guys have Prist?" They said, "Yep, we got Prist." So I elected to fill the airplane without Prist, fly low up over all of the Caribbean islands, and then land at St. Martin, and then fuel and go on. And my rationale was, well, if I stay low, the fuel is not going to get cold. So I think we flew at like maybe 20,000 feet right up the island chain. It turned out to be awesome because, I mean, those are some really pretty islands that you fly over. Canawan looks really cool, and some of these other islands. So, and then I thought there's runways all the way up the path, and then we're not over water, and it was
so
totally
if you got
fine.
The fuel filter bypass
Right,
flight,
yeah.
which means you're getting ice. And then
Yeah, exactly. So that was my rationale, and the fuel stayed pretty warm because we didn't go very high. So then we ended up landing in St. Martin.
But Prist on that airplane is not always required. It's only below a certain fuel temperature. Is that right?
Yeah. You know what? I'd have to. It's been so long.
But what you did, I don't think you didn't. Nothing was illegal.
No,
right?
it was just
a
a
matter of.
Yeah, it's just you always put
Yeah,
Prist
the
in it
plan.
because there's no fuel heater. So I'm like, well, I guess we'll just keep the fuel warm.
Yeah,
and
I
not
think
go
there's
high.
if I remember right, there was a.
Yeah.
That's how it worked. But.
So, anyways, so that's what we ended up doing. We do the approach into St. Martin over the beach. I'm sure all the professional pilots know about
I got
that.
a great photo.
Yeah.
I can send you. You can post it on the gram.
Yes, I have some good ones too. So we land there, we taxi in. I'm like, okay, we made it, and the owner of the airplane just in the back goes, guys, this place looks awesome. And he jumps out of the plane, grabs his suitcase and goes, let's stay here for a while. So we ended up staying for like 3 or 4 days in St. Martin. And it turned out to be this awesome experience there. We were at the Sunset Beach Bar, which many folks know about. And, and the owner happened to be a pilot, so he was totally into it. So we just hung out on the beach bar and watched airplanes land all day and got, to stand on the beach and get blasted by the DC-9s and whatever else, the old airplanes that were taking off. And I got blown into the water, and it was super cool. But yeah, so I guess we turned lemons into lemonade on that trip and ended up having a great experience at St. Martin. But I don't know, what would you have done in that scenario?
No, that's what I would have done. I mean,
Yeah.
what are your options?
Yeah,
Wait
it was
for
just
FedEx
like-
to show
yeah,
up
I
to
know,
Trinidad
that
with
was-
some Prist.
Exactly.
I mean,
so
you fly low and
yeah,
to where they have some.
so that worked good. Yeah, and it turned out to be a good destination.
Next
to go
time
to.
we have where we have to come up with a story like
Yeah.
this, remind me, and we'll talk about the motorcycles in Greece story.
Oh yes, that is a good one. So, anyways, yeah, and then the rest of the trip was uneventful, but it turned out to be an awesome time. But it was a little stressful down in Trinidad negotiating. So, lessons learned, and this is all like no duh stuff for most of you guys. But hey, when you're flying international, especially when you're not familiar, definitely have some cash on hand.
Have cash on hand in an airplane that requires Prist. If
Yeah.
you're leaving the country,
Yeah,
bring some Prist.
bring some Prist. Now, I've been told
Because
in
they'll
it-
say they have, like Mexico's
Yeah.
infamous. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
they have Prist. You show up. No Prist,
Oh,
my
yeah.
friend.
Yeah. And I've heard, and now this could be totally wrong, so don't take this as gospel. I've heard there's like a special way that you should transport Prist.
It's one of those things, though, isn't it? Like considered hazmat or something?
Yeah. So someone was saying, like, in case it leaks. So anyways, yeah, lessons learned. Cash, Prist.
Carry Prist. It's,
carry Prist not in the cabin.
Yeah, make sure you do some research and look into the
Put that in the-
hazmat and
baggage.
considerations and all that good stuff. But
Yeah, you don't want to breathe that stuff. So, and then
always
we have
carry Prist. Always carry some oil.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that before too, where you in Cabo and also
Yeah.
you need oil. Remember that? I had the
Class-
bonnet when we're standing on the wing and socks
Yeah.
and the whole thing.
Lessons learned from us.
Did I ever tell you about the buddy hose that I got?
No.
You know what a buddy hose is? So on Gulfstreams, and this was mainly on like the older Gulfstreams. I think now they don't let you do it on the newer ones, but there was a hose and you could plug it into the external air start port.
Okay.
And it had which is normally a one-way valve. It only lets air in, right? It doesn't let air out if you have the APU running or something. Well, this was designed. It had these special pins that would come up and would push the door open. And so what the way it was designed is if you had a Gulfstream and your APU was dead and you're in Africa or somewhere really remote where they don't have external air start, you could have another Gulfstream parked next to you and they would be the donor and you would plug the buddy hose. So you'd plug the one with the special pins so they could give air, and then you would plug it the other end into the airplane that needed air to start, and you could start one Gulfstream from another, like jump starting a car.
I was just going to say, it sounds like the world's most expensive jump start.
Yeah, so the thing was, if you needed one, they could ship you this buddy hose, and they would charge you like $10,000 because they knew they just had you. So I found this military surplus one, and I had the ends, and I got the whole thing built for like $600 or $800. And I carried this thing around when we'd go on these international trips, and I just wanted to use that thing so bad.
Oh, man.
I never got the opportunity either to jump somebody. I mean, I had the thing where the APU, that's another great story I could tell. Remember with the APU and in Goose Bay and the whole thing?
Oh, yeah.
That's another good one. We'll save for another day.
We're just teasing. So I want to know, did you like monitor the Gulfstream forums and be like,
I just figured
ship it out to you?
I just heard about it. I'm like, that would be so cool to have. And just, and two, you could be the hero if you're playing brakes and you're like, oh, I got this buddy hose. Don't worry, and you do it. I always thought it would be so cool, and I never.
Did you carry this thing around all the time?
Yeah, it just was in a bag. It was like a flexible hose. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was like in this duffel bag, and I would just throw it in the bag.
God, that would have been.
I guess the thing was though, once you plugged it in and it got air pressure, it would you had to make sure no one was by it.
Yeah.
Once it pressurized, it would snap around like a snake.
I bet. Yeah, and then when they get I'm trying to think for. In the Challenger, I want to say it's like at least 60, maybe 80 PSI you got to get a crossbleed start to. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of air moving there. I love it. I actually do now remember. Do you bought it on eBay or something?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, exactly. I bought it on eBay and
we're so full of bad advice today.
No, that was good. There was a big toolbox in that hole. I stuffed it all in there. It was great.
Yeah,
it's probably still there.
It's awesome. All right. Well, a lot of lessons learned today, kids. So you learn from our vast experience. Some of us are smart and prepared like Max, and some of us are not so prepared like me. But either way, that is going to do it for this episode of the 21.5 Show. It's the podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Visit us on the web. It's 215podcast.com. Of course, you should connect with us on LinkedIn. We have our official site. Link is in the show notes. And then you can just connect with Max directly too, obviously, and then send those private messages as often as you can.
Yes, please. And those of you professional aviators that are working this Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes.
It's just a day. Remember that.
That's right. Shout out.
Goes. For those of you that have it off, enjoy it. Not everybody does.
We have all been there. The Thanksgiving meal in the crew lounge.
Mildly depressing Thanksgiving meal in the crew lounge or provided by the hotel. Thanks to our sponsor, Harvey Watt. Thanks to all of our listeners. Thanks to the listeners that donate to support the show.
And thanks to Christy DeYoung for coming on and sharing all of her knowledge. Her contact info will be in the show notes. Sounds like money well spent to get a pro to do the letters of A.
Absolutely.
It's going to be it. Until next time, remember...
flexibility. It's the key to air power. See you guys.
Rock on.